Man, we got a few little surprises that are tearing up the meta. Make sure you guys smash the crap out of that RB button so you guys don't miss out on more Oscar. I told you we were going to talk about RB today. So RB, out of this last weekend alone, topped not one, not two, but 3 different regionals. And one of those regionals had 2 making the top cut, which is pretty interesting. Now, some of these builds have been moving to make concessions to some of the pieces that the list are playing. For example, one of the lists was starting to move, some of the pieces into the side deck so that they could actually, make more of a use of the tools that the deck kind of has. Also, Sky Striker getting a lot cheaper, I think really helped out some of the choices that RB kind of had working around with it to do its thing. I think the Cyanos build has been the one that... So there's you can do a Cyanos, you can test out some other little cheeky things you can do, but you gotta remember, you're working underneath an extra deck lock that's a little bit harsh in the way that it functions. You do have to make some concessions with how things are actually kind of working in the deck. Obviously, Urgent Schedule is another very, very good tech choice for you to be able to play. It's almost like this deck wants to go second. And anytime we have a meta where we can kind of see a spread of going second decks kind of peering into the meta, we actually kind of get a decent idea of where things are going. So, yes, RB is destroying some of these regionals, which is wonderful. We've been wanting to see a different aura of things coming about. And yes, unfortunately, Sky Striker is one of the tools that this deck is adapting, or unfortunately being forced to kind of adapt into playing. And I mean, it makes the most sense, right? You're dealing with a great set of tools that a deck has. And obviously, just go second, make big monster, opponent stare at you and go, yeah, I can't really do anything about that. Seems good. Magnet Warriors. So, Magnet Warrior Fiendsmith has turned into probably the biggest contender of the Magnet Warrior decks. It's kind of crazy to think about because we've come a pretty long way for what this deck was working with originally, because the TCG version originally started with let's play the big Magnet Warrior stuff. There's nothing wrong with calling up the big guys and relying on them to kind of clear through some of the way so that, you could kind of play the game. And I mean, yeah, the big Magnet Warrior fusion of Valkyrion and Berserkion is an incredibly powerful card. Ain't nobody gonna be doubting that one. But the problem at the end of the day is, you're playing a lot of bricks, and the more that we've learned about the Yu-Gi-Oh! Trading card game is, the more bricks that your deck tends to be playing, well, kind of the worse off you end up being in hindsight. So we've kind of seen a little bit of a shift into the Fiendsmith stuff, just being kind of like the extra little board state for you to set up. Obviously, other decks are using the Fiendsmith as well, but, this one is still doing its thing. Also, most of the tools that the deck is playing is pretty standard across the board. You can pull up any Magnet Warrior list right now, I think from YGO Pro decks from the recent regionals, and you're going to see pretty much the same story. Don't be fooled, though. You can still try to play the big Magnet Warrior package within the deck. It's not going to get you the results that you're wanting, though. You're going to want a nice, consistent way to actually, work. And, there's not really much that can really get done on that front. But Magnet Warriors are actually doing some great things in terms of the meta. So, hey, good news. If you want to pick up Magnet Warriors, they're still semi-relevant within the scope of things. And, that's actually not too bad. So, not looking too bad. Sky Striker is back and cooking very, very well. I think this one is one of the most interesting surprises to me. I didn't think a lot of people... I actually underestimated the amount of people that were going to pick up the modern decks and rush out and want to play Sky Striker. I thought that, Sky Striker wasn't going to be a deck that a lot of players would resonate with. And it appears that I was wholeheartedly wrong. Most of the players that have been rushing out and playing Sky Strikers been doing very, very good with the budgetary side of the deck. I mean, it's crazy when you look at these regionals, you see $80 and $70 for some of these prices of these decks. But I mean, this is the reality that we're in right now. So yes, you can pick up Sky Strikers. Yes, you can do, I would say, decently well with the deck. It is a deck that does have a semi-decent level of skill to it. The skill is how many engages can you draw to kind of break through those fields that your opponent's setting up. And typically, if you can generate enough advantage, you can usually play through a lot of the scenarios you have. Things like Vanquishal are not going to be your friend. It's kind of sad, actually, because a lot of these matchups you can play into, you can do decently well going second. Gosh darn it, even going first some of the time is not actually just, a terrible decision. But it's enough that, if you know what you're doing with Sky Striker, you can do well. Also, I will say, in terms of, the budgetary side of the game, having budget Yu-Gi-Oh decks that players can kind of work with and figure out, oh, hey, this is a deck that can actually get off the ground. We can actually have it work with enough of the options, and it actually works out decently well. I mean, seems good enough to me. So, congratulations to all the Sky Striker players out there, actually doing great things and actually proving that this deck is still viable. Now, there's also the question of what's going on with Mitsurugi. I've heard a lot of people going, Mitsurugi needs to be stopped. Suddenly, Mitsurugi is this incredibly crazy, and it's like, I'm over here looking at regional data, and there's regionals where Mitsurugi's not even popping up. I get that we've got the good old meta fatigue and we're all super upset and all of this crazy stuff has been happening, but no, we don't need to actually do anything to, Mitsurugi at this point. Get over it. I get over the fact that Mitsurugi is still going to be a deck. It's going to sit here. It's tuned down to the point, because all I've been hearing is prayers needs to go to 1. It's buddy, on a regional level, if Mitsurugi is struggling, there's, the meta's power creeping at a good rate that, a deck like Mitsurugi has been forced to kind of take a backseat. No, it's not completely cratered out of the meta. That's not the point. The point is, we've got enough diversity and enough options present in the game that we can kind of, see a different amount of things actually coming into fruition and actually working. So that's why, I think Mitsurugi's fine. Is regional data is proving to us that it is not really doing well enough to justify a particular banning at this point. The people that are justifying it, I get it. You're just upset that, Mitsurugi's been here for so long. All right? Just counter the meta. It is not necessarily that hard to kind of curve out things and step up and actually curve out and try to beat the meta. All right? Crazy. Next up is Azamina. So, how many different builds of Azamina, or how many different takes of Azamina can we kind of shove into one particular meta? Because the first thing you look at and you're like, oh, okay, cool, White Forest is a deck. Of course they're going to play because that's what their deck does. But there's also been the pretty major uptick of things where we're seeing, Azamina starting to slot into things like Yummy. Well, I mean, Radiant Typhoon, Yummy Pile Azamina, Dark Magician of Destruction into Dragoon was a real deck. It was something that we've seen, kind of coming through time and time again and kind of doing some kind of stupid things, honestly. But that wasn't the major thing. It's just, the Azamina stuff, players are clutching on to this idea of we need to have Omni Negates. We need to have levels of things that we can use to control these metas. And, it's crazy to me how much players rely on Omni Negates as, clutch tools to be able to, try to play the game. So, I guess, from where I'm sitting right now, Azamina, it's not particularly a new tool set, but it's definitely enough to, look at that the meta's kind of shaping up and allowing, you know, Azamina to kind of slot in. Or maybe there's just a clutch that players need to feel onto. But either way, we've got some interesting things happening here. So, what do you guys think about everything? Please leave a comment down below what you guys think, and I'll see your beautiful faces back later in the day, guys. Patrons! Thank you!
Thank you so much for watching. Check out these other videos.